On this episode of In Case You Missed It, we're talking Mustangs, McLarens, and the best car I drove in 2016. Hey guys, Chad here, and this is another episode of In Case You Missed It. This week we're taking a break from news and we're going to talk about the best car I drove in 2016. And we kick things off with the absolutely incredible Mclaren 570 GT. It is a crushing example of brilliant engineering, a beautiful interior. In any sane and rational universe, it would be my car of the year.
This is McLaren's offering of normal.
It is just, it has to be driven to believe. It may be the baby McLaren, but it's still next level stuff.
Oh my God. Okay, so this thing is stupid fast.
Well, I'm sure as Greg will tell you, this thing accelerates like few other cars I've ever driven. Sure, I've driven cars with more power, Hellcat for example, but few get up and go like this car does. And that is all down to the phenomenal traction control system. I know what you're thinking, well, why don't you just turn the traction control system off? Well, in this car, you don't. It's incredible. You just put your foot down and there's none of that stuff you normally associate with traction control. The wheel shutter, the dip in power, that sort of lag in acceleration, none of it. Put your foot down in the McLaren 570 GT and it firmly plants your ass right in the rear of the seat every time you pull a gear.
The shifts are so immediate.
So if the McLaren 570 GT is such a great car, why isn't it obviously my contender for car of the year? It's too good for its own good. To really push this car, to really have fun in it, you have to go at speeds that, best case scenario, Johnny Law forcibly and violently removes you from your license, or more likely scenario, you run out of talent and wrap yourself around a tree, engaging yourself in a swift and fiery death. Now, to really be enjoyed, this thing needs to be on a track at $200,000 plus, adding a track or track days or whatever. You can see how expensive this gets, and it gets expensive really quickly.
I want this car, I want to buy it. I want to buy it now.
So the McLaren 570 is just a little bit out of reach. So now we come back to something a little more sensible, a little more obtainable, a car that is more than likely going to be my next vehicle. That is the Cadillac Ats 2-liter turbo. It's not even the fastest car in its own family tree. Hell, it's not even the fastest car in its class. This thing, I know what you're thinking, but it's a great car. Ever since it came out, I've just wanted one. Every time I saw one, I just wanted one. It's got 270 horsepower, manual box, rear-wheel drive. That's really all I want. And after my cursory, what can I do to tune this thing up research, I found that you can get this thing close to 400 horsepower for not that much money. So at the end of the day, you end up with a really good car. It looks great, it drives great, it's got a manual box, and you got almost 400 horsepower. In a daily driver, what more do you need? As many of you know, I'm a fan of a luxury sports sedan. I like that dual personality, a topic I'll touch on a little later on as well, in that Monday through Friday, it's all business, get you to work in style and luxury, and on the weekends, it's fully capable of having a little bit of fun. The ATS is a very good car, but when it comes to sports sedans, nothing was better than the M2. This thing, you read all the journals, you watch all the TV shows, everybody sings this car's praises, and it's rightfully so. This is one of the best cars I've ever driven. It's so much fun. It's the perfect size. 365 horsepower is the perfect amount of power from its 3-liter straight 6 twin turbocharged engine. It's a great car. But again, you have to be asking, why isn't it my contender for car of the year? And the simple fact of that is, I didn't get enough time with it. The first time I drove it, the check engine light came on relatively shortly into my drive. And then the second time I drove it, it had been so beaten on the track that the brakes and the tires were pretty much shot for the day. So I couldn't really enjoy all this car had to offer. At this point, let me take a second to just kind of define what I think of when I think of best car. It really comes down to two factors. Number one, is it fun to drive? We're all enthusiasts. What's the point of buying a car that isn't fun to drive? Number two is that gut reaction we all have when we look at a car. Immediately we think, I must have that car, or regardless of how good it is, I could do without that car. And that's exactly what brings me to the Nissan Gtr. It may very well be Hanson's favorite car.
It feels just like any other car, but just sitting in it, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Like Jeremy Clarkson and James May calls it the fizz. And for me, this has one of those things.
See what I mean? The thing of it is, though, is unlike Hanson, the GTR doesn't hit me. It doesn't, for whatever reason, I don't covet one. I'm not going to sit here and tell you by any stretch of the imagination that it's a bad car. Far from it. It's almost pathological attention to detail makes it a phenomenal engineer's car and just incredibly fast. But like I said, it doesn't hit me in the feels. I don't pine for one like Hanson does.
Yes, it feels good. Oh man, love that GTR. I still believe that this is a kind of like a performance bargain, even though it's over 100 grand, and even the Nismo version, that's over at $175,000.
The GTR may very well still be a performance bargain when you consider the class it's keeping. However, it's still over $100,000, and in the Nismo Edition's case, over $170,000. That's a huge amount of coin to part with, and if you're looking to have fun in a car and still have it be a bargain, may I direct you at the Ford Mustang, specifically the GT350. It's got great suspension, great brakes, etc., but the engine, the 5.2-liter Voodoo engine, it's got 526 horsepower and it revs to an astonishing 8,200 RPM. This thing is every bit as fun as the GTR, but at a price at just over $50,000, depending on what dealer you go for and what kind of markup they're charging, it's a bargain. Your brain needs reprogramming when driving a GT350. Your eyes tell you it's a Mustang. Your ears tell you, hey, you've hit 6,500 RPM, it's time to shift, and you have nearly 2,000 RPM left to go. The brakes are phenomenal. The suspension is great. It is no longer just a point and shoot muscle car, pony car, whatever you want to call it. It is a full-on sports car, and it's a sports car that should be terrifying Europe's elite. If the Mustang GT350 is the best pony car we drove in 2016, let's take a moment and talk about the worst. I'm talking about the 2016 Chevy Camaro 2LT. It shares the same exact Alpha platform as the ATS I talked about earlier, not to mention the same engine. So why is the ATS probably my next car? And why is the Camaro the worst pony car we had in 2016? It's simple. It's a Camaro. And there lies the problem with this car. It's actually a pretty good car to drive, but when you take the fact that it's a pony car, and pony cars and Camaros in general aren't supposed to have a little 4-cylinder engine in it, no matter how good it is. And that's the thing. Plus it had an automatic transmission, so you have this heritage on one hand, automatic transmission in the other, and that's how it became the worst pony car I drove in 2016. The Camaro 2LT is far from my least favorite car that I drove in 2016. In fact, there were a few contenders for that title. Number one is the Buick Regal GS. This is one of the best Buicks I've ever driven. Unfortunately, there's quite a few things that keep it from being the really good car that it can be. Number one is there's chrome everywhere on this thing. It's really gaudy and it's unnecessary. Number two, it comes in an automatic only. Now, if you have a small car with 260 horsepower, all-wheel drive, you need a manual transmission to have fun with it. Unfortunately, the automatic transmission in this keeps it from being a really good car. I know what you're thinking. Buick hasn't really made a good car since the Grand National, so why should we even be surprised? There were a few surprises on this list, however, and that comes from Lexus, and I am talking about the CT200H. It is a hybrid, it is a hatchback, and it is completely terrible. Making it even worse and making it the worst car I drove in 2016 is the fact that someone at Lexus had the gall, the effrontery, to put an F-Sport badge on this thing. There's nothing sporty about this thing. Yeah, it has a little bit of a spoiler and the body kit makes it actually a handsome car. However, it accelerates to 60 in just under 10 seconds. The braking performance isn't great. The handling's okay, but it's still attached to an automatic transmission, so you really can't wring it out, which is what this thing needs to have any sort of fun with it. And that's why it gets the coveted tag of worst car I drove in 2016. If the CT200 is a bad car from a good manufacturer, let me take you to a phenomenal, a great car from a manufacturer that has, well, let's just face it, a less than fantastic reputation in the States here, or even worldwide when it comes to reliability. That, of course, is Alfa Romeo and their brilliant 4C. Yes, it's not all that well put together. Yes, there's a rattle behind your head. Yes, the stereo system looks like out of the tuner catalog from an early 2000s magazine, but none of that, and I mean none of that actually matters, because when you drive this thing, all you're focused on is the drive. The 4C may only produce 237 horsepower from its 1.7 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, but it doesn't matter. The 4C is light. It has a full carbon fiber chassis, and I know how light has come under debate recently, but the fact remains that this thing handles like an absolute go-kart. That lightweight just sharpens everything, the steering, the braking, the whole experience. Yes, you can't get into the trunk. Yes, it has manual steering, but none of that matters. I guarantee you, if you just drive this thing, you'll see what I mean. It's an absolute phenomenon, and it is one of, if not the best car I drove in 2016. So at this point, you may be wondering, if the Mclaren was the most epic drive I had in 2016, the 4C was the most fun I had in 2016, the Mustang GT350 was the most mind-bending car I drove in 2016, and the Cadillac Ats 2-liter is likely to be my next car, what the hell was the best car in 2016? Well, that is a little hatchback, the Ford Focus RS. If you're a regular to the page, you'll know that I'm a big fan of hot hatchbacks. I love their, again, that dual personality of practicality and fun. As many of you may know, I've owned 2 Ford Focuses. The second I actually tuned on pretty heavily, but I've always pined for Ford to bring us one of their European hot hatches, the RS, and eventually they did give us the ST, which is a brilliant car in its own right, but the RS goes all the way to freaking 11. The Focus RS is the absolute definition of an all-rounder. It'll haul you, your friends, and all your stuff in comfort all day, every day. But when that moment hits you, when you hit that perfect road and you really want to go for a drive, it does it and then some. The thing that makes the RS great is you can actually have fun in it and not really be breaking the law. I mean, you'll be close, but you won't be breaking the law. And that's what makes it so good for me, is that you can actually enjoy what this car has to offer and not risk death, not risk a ticket, not risk, you know, losing your license, you know what I mean? It has everything you want. It's got the 350 horsepower. It's got the phenomenal suspension. It's got all-wheel drive. Hell, it even has a freaking drift button. But at the end of the day, it's accessible on the roads. You don't need to take it to a track to enjoy it. You can enjoy it whenever you want. And that's why it's my contender for Shifting Lanes Enthusiast Car of the Year. And that's it. Whether you agree or disagree, leave it in the comments below. As always, if you like our stuff, please share and subscribe. Also, you can find us on Twitter at @ShiftingLanes and on Facebook at facebook.com/ShiftingLanes. Again, I wish everyone a happy new year. Be safe out there. I've been Chad, and I'll catch you next time.